The grandfather clock in our Victorian hallway chimed twice as I hunched over my restoration desk, carefully applying adhesive to the spine of a 1923 first edition Hemingway. The musty smell of old paper and leather filled my nostrils, a scent that had become more comforting than my wife's perfume these past months. My phone buzzed against the wooden surface, its blue glow cutting through the amber light of my desk lamp. April's name appeared on the screen with a message that made my coffee grow cold in my hands. He wrote about love, so I became his muse. I stared at those words, reading them 3 times before setting down my restoration brush. Perfect timing for a plot twist, I thought. Shame she's not much of an editor. My name is Jack Halden, and I restore rare books for a living. People think it's boring work, gluing pages, cleaning covers, preserving stories that most folks have forgotten. But there's something poetic about bringing damaged things back to life, about finding the truth hidden beneath layers of neglect and lies. At 38, I've learned that people are a lot like old books. They look pristine on the outside, but crack them open and you'll find torn pages, missing chapters, and stories that don't match the cover. April had been on her creative retreat for 5 days now. She'd kissed my cheek before leaving, her lips tasting like mint and deception, though I hadn't recognized the latter flavor at the time. She claimed she needed inspiration for her gallery's upcoming literature festival, the biggest cultural event our coastal town had seen in years. Just some quiet time to think, Jack. You understand, right? You're always buried in those dusty books anyway. I'd nodded, even helped her pack. Supportive husband, that's me. The kind of guy who makes sandwiches for his wife's affair. Now, staring at her cryptic message, I felt something shift inside my chest. Not heartbreak, but clarity, like when you finally identify the missing piece of a damaged manuscript. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself another cup of coffee, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floors. Our house had character, April always said. Built in 1887, it had survived 3 generations of families, 2 fires, and 1 major renovation that we'd tackled together during our first year of marriage. The walls held memories like pressed flowers between book pages. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo. April standing next to a tall man with silver hair and expensive clothes. His hand rested possessively on her lower back. The caption read, "Found my inspiration." I recognized him immediately. John Sterling, the acclaimed novelist whose pretentious literary fiction had somehow garnered a cult following. He was scheduled to be the keynote speaker at April's festival. Apparently he was also scheduled to be her new lover. Setting my coffee aside, I climbed the narrow stairs to my attic office. April rarely came up here, claiming the space was too cramped and dusty for her taste. She preferred clean lines and modern aesthetics. I preferred books, shadows, and the kind of quiet that lets you think dangerous thoughts. I pulled out April's old laptop, the one she'd abandoned when her gallery bought her a sleek new MacBook. She'd never bothered to delete her accounts from this one, and her password had always been embarrassingly simple. Gallery 123? The laptop hummed to life, and I began my archaeological dig through my wife's digital infidelity. Her email revealed a paper trail of deception stretching back 3 months. Messages to John Sterling that started professional and gradually became personal, then intimate. Plans for meetings, hotel reservations, and most damaging of all, a detailed conversation with her best friend Lila about their scheme. "The festival is perfect cover," April had written. "Jack won't suspect anything. He's too buried in his books to notice what's happening in the real world. Besides, John wants to write about our affair. Can you imagine? I'll be immortal in literature." Lila's response was equally revealing. "What about Jack? He's been good to you." "He's a placeholder," April replied. "Sweet, but small. John is going places. He has connections, money, influence. Jack restores old things. John creates new ones." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I leaned back in my chair, processing the betrayal with the same methodical approach I used for damaged manuscripts. Assess the damage, identify the missing pieces, plan the restoration. But some things can't be restored. Some things deserve to be rewritten entirely. I scrolled through more messages, finding evidence of April's plan to gradually move money from our joint accounts into a private savings account. She'd already transferred $3,000, money we'd saved for a vacation to Ireland. My phone rang, jolting me from my research. Gloria Hendricks, our 70-year-old neighbor, appeared on the caller ID. "Jack, dear, I hope I'm not calling too late. I saw your light on and wanted to check if everything's all right. I noticed April's been gone for several days." Gloria was the unofficial information hub of our neighborhood. Retired librarian, master gardener, and keeper of everyone's secrets. If you wanted to know who was having an affair, whose teenager got arrested, or which marriage was falling apart, Gloria was your source. She's on a work retreat, I said, surprised by how normal my voice sounded. Preparing for the literature festival. Oh, that's right. Such an important event for the town, though I did hear some interesting gossip about that Sterling fellow who's speaking. Apparently he has quite the reputation with married women. I gripped the phone tighter. What kind of reputation? Well, you didn't hear this from me, but Margaret from the book club has a daughter who works in publishing in New York. She says Sterling has a pattern of seducing wives of literary professionals. Editors, agents, bookstore owners. Claims it's research for his novels, but really he just enjoys the thrill of destruction. Interesting research method. Indeed. Margaret's daughter says he's ruined at least 3 marriages that she knows of. Always moves on once the novelty wears off. Leaves quite a mess behind. After Gloria hung up, I sat in the darkness of my attic office, pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. April wasn't John's first married conquest, and she wouldn't be his last. She thought she was special, his muse, his inspiration. In reality, she was just another chapter in his ongoing research project. I opened a new document on my computer and began typing a response to April's text, something that would let her know the game had changed without revealing how much I knew. Some stories deserve a wider audience, I wrote, then hit send. My phone immediately showed that she'd read the message, but no response came. I imagined her showing it to John, both of them trying to decode my meaning. Let them wonder. I spent the next hour documenting everything I'd found, screenshots, saved emails, copied text messages, evidence of adultery, financial deception, and emotional abandonment. Not for a lawyer, though. I had something more creative in mind. April had always underestimated me. To her, I was just the quiet guy who fixed broken books, who preferred staying home to attending gallery openings, who was content with small-town life while she dreamed of bigger things. She saw my contentment as complacency, my preference for peace as weakness. She was about to learn the difference between quiet and passive. I walked downstairs and poured myself a glass of whiskey, the good stuff we'd been saving for a special occasion. This seemed special enough. Tomorrow, I would begin my own creative project. April wanted to be immortalized in literature. I'd make sure she got her wish, just not in the way she expected. Some books need gentle restoration. Others need to be completely rewritten. I raised my glass to the empty house and smiled for the first time in months. I woke before dawn, my mind sharp despite only 3 hours of rest. The house felt different somehow. Not empty, but liberated. Like a museum after closing time, when the exhibits can finally relax and be themselves. My first call was to the bank. I explained that I suspected unauthorized access to our accounts and requested new passwords and card numbers. Perfectly legal, since my name was on everything. The customer service representative was sympathetic and efficient. By 8 a.m., April would find herself financially stranded. Next, I visited our attorney, Bill Morrison, who'd handled the paperwork when we bought the house. I explained that I needed to understand my rights regarding joint property and accounts in case of marital difficulties. I'm not saying anything's wrong, I told him, sitting in his cluttered office that smelled like coffee and legal documents. But I want to be prepared. Bill, a heavy-set man with kind eyes and a rumpled suit, nodded knowingly. Smart thinking, Jack. Better to have information you don't need than need information you don't have. Let me pull up your property records. He confirmed what I'd hoped. The house was in both our names, but I could legally change the locks and ask April to leave if I felt our marriage was over. The joint accounts were trickier, but since I'd discovered evidence of unauthorized transfers, I had grounds to freeze them temporarily. Just remember, Bill cautioned, documentation is everything. Keep records of everything you do and everything she does. The truth has a way of protecting itself when it's properly preserved. I left his office with a folder full of legal advice and a clearer understanding of my options. April thought she held all the cards because she made more money and had more social connections. But I owned half of everything we'd built together, and I knew how to research, document, and plan. My next stop was the hardware store, where I bought new locks for the front and back doors. The elderly clerk, Henry, recognized me from my occasional visits for house repairs. Upgrading security, Jack? Something like that. My wife's been worried about break-ins while she's traveling. Henry nodded approvingly. Smart thinking. Can't be too careful these days. I also purchased a small security camera system. Nothing fancy, just basic units that could monitor the interior of our house. All perfectly legal on my own property. Back home, I spent the morning installing the new locks and cameras. The work felt therapeutic, like rebinding a book with fresh materials. I was taking something damaged and making it stronger. Around noon, Gloria appeared at my back door with a plate of homemade cookies and an eager expression. "Thought you might be hungry," she said, though we both knew she was fishing for information. "How's the house maintenance going?" "Just some security improvements. April will be surprised when she gets back." Gloria's eyes sparkled with curiosity. "When is she returning?" "Soon, I think. She's been having such an inspiring time on her retreat." I invited Gloria in for coffee, knowing she'd appreciate the gesture and that I might learn something useful. She settled into our kitchen chair like a queen holding court. "You know, Jack, I've been thinking about what we discussed last night, about that Sterling fellow. Margaret called this morning with more details from her daughter." I poured coffee and waited. Gloria never rushed her stories. "Apparently Sterling has a very specific pattern. He targets wives of men in literary or artistic professions. Always married women, never single. He seems to enjoy the challenge of seduction and the drama of broken marriages. His publisher is starting to worry about the bad publicity." "Sounds like a real charmer." "Oh, he's charming enough. That's how he gets away with it. But Margaret's daughter says the women always end up worse off than when they started. He uses them for inspiration, then discards them when the next project comes along." I filed this information away with everything else I was learning about my wife's new lover. John Sterling wasn't just an adulterer. He was a predator who treated other people's marriages like research material. "I don't suppose you know when he's arriving in town for the festival?" Gloria's smile turned sly. "As a matter of fact, I do. Margaret volunteers at the Visitors Center and she saw the booking. He's staying at the Harbor View Hotel, arriving tomorrow. Booked the penthouse suite for a week." After Gloria left, I called the Harbor View Hotel and made a reservation for their restaurant tomorrow evening. I explained that I was hoping to meet the famous novelist who was staying there, maybe get a book signed for my wife. The desk clerk was happy to help. Apparently Sterling had already made dinner reservations for 2. I spent the afternoon preparing for April's return. I packed her clothes neatly in suitcases and set them by the front door. I printed copies of all the evidence I'd gathered and organized them in a folder labeled Creative Writing Project. I prepared legal documents requesting her removal from our joint accounts and mortgage. Everything was ready when my phone rang at 4 p.m. "Jack?" April's voice sounded strained. "I'm having trouble with my credit card. The hotel says it was declined." "That's strange. Maybe there's a problem with the bank system. I tried calling, but they said the account's been frozen. Do you know anything about that?" I paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make her nervous. "I discovered some unauthorized transfers from our savings account. $3,000 moved without my knowledge. I thought it was safer to freeze everything until we could figure out what happened." "Jack, I can explain." "I'm sure you can. When are you coming home? We should discuss this in person." Another pause. "I'll be there tomorrow evening." "Perfect. I'll be waiting." After she hung up, I called Eli Rodriguez, my oldest friend and the most reliable mechanic in town. Eli ran a small shop near the marina and had a talent for creative problem solving. "Jack, haven't heard from you in weeks. What's going on?" "I need a favor, Eli, something discreet." "Sounds interesting. What kind of favor?" I explained that April was having an affair and that I wanted to gather more evidence before confronting her. I asked if he could help me keep tabs on her movements when she returned to town. "Man, I'm sorry. April always seemed like good people." "People change. Or maybe they just get better at hiding who they really are." Eli agreed to help. He knew everyone at the marina, the hotels, and most of the restaurants in town. If April and John went anywhere public, Eli would hear about it. That evening, I visited Murphy's Tavern, the neighborhood bar where locals gathered to share gossip and complain about tourists. I nursed a beer and listened to conversations, dropping subtle questions about the upcoming literature festival. "You hear about this writer coming to town?" asked Pete, the bartender. "Sterling something." "John Sterling," I supplied. "My wife's helping coordinate his visit." "Lucky her. I heard he's got quite the reputation with the ladies." "What kind of reputation?" Pete leaned closer, lowering his voice. "My cousin works at a hotel in Boston. Says Sterling stayed there last month with some married woman. Made a real scene when her husband showed up. Security had to escort the husband out." I shook my head sympathetically. Some people have no respect for marriage. "Tell me about it." Though I heard the husband got his revenge eventually, something about exposing the whole affair at the woman's workplace. She ended up losing her job. I filed away this information with everything else. John Sterling left a trail of broken marriages and ruined lives wherever he went. April thought she was special, but she was just his latest victim. The difference was, her husband wouldn't be escorted out by security. Walking home through the quiet streets, I felt a strange sense of peace. For months, I'd sensed something was wrong, but couldn't identify it. Now I knew exactly what I was dealing with, and I had a plan. April had always been the social one in our marriage, the one with connections and ambitions. She thought those advantages made her untouchable, but she'd forgotten that I was good at research, patient with details, and experienced at repairing things that seemed beyond salvation. Tomorrow, she would come home expecting to find the same quiet, accommodating husband she'd left behind. Instead, she'd discover that some books, once damaged, can't be restored to their original condition. Sometimes they need to be rebound entirely. April's key wouldn't turn in the front door. I watched through the window as she tried it 3 times, her face progressing from confusion to frustration to anger. She was alone. Apparently John had dropped her off rather than face me directly. I opened the door before she could knock, standing in the doorway with her suitcases at my feet. "Welcome home," I said pleasantly. "I thought you might need these." She stared at the luggage, then at me. "Jack, what's going on? Why won't my key work?" "I upgraded our security system while you were away. Come in, let's talk." April stepped inside, her eyes scanning the familiar space as if seeing it for the first time. She looked good, rested, glowing, the way women do when they're having exciting affairs. Her hair was styled differently, and she wore a dress I'd never seen before. "You look different," I observed, inspired. She had the grace to blush. "Jack, about my message." "Oh, that. Yes, I've been thinking about your text, about muses and inspiration and the stories we tell ourselves." I gestured toward the living room. "Shall we sit? I made coffee." April perched on the edge of our sofa like a bird ready to take flight. I settled into my favorite chair, the worn leather recliner where I read manuscripts and planned restoration projects. "I know this looks bad," she began. "Does it? I'm not sure what this is yet. Why don't you explain it to me?" She launched into a prepared speech about creative inspiration, professional networking, and the importance of the literature festival. She mentioned John Sterling's reputation, his connections in the publishing world, the opportunities that might arise from their collaboration. I listened without interrupting, watching her perform. April had always been good at presentations. It was part of her job at the gallery. She knew how to frame things in the most favorable light, how to make questionable decisions sound reasonable and necessary. "So you're telling me," I said when she finished, "that your relationship with John Sterling is purely professional?" "Yes, exactly." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the photo she'd sent me. "Then help me understand this image, your Muse comment, the way his hand is positioned." April's composure cracked slightly. "Jack, you're misinterpreting—" "Am I? Because I've done some research while you were away. About John Sterling's reputation with married women, about his pattern of seducing wives for literary inspiration, about the trail of broken marriages he's left across 3 states. Her face went pale. "You don't understand. What John and I have is different, special. I'm sure it feels that way. I'm sure it felt that way to the gallery owner's wife in Boston, and the editor's wife in Philadelphia, and the bookstore owner's wife in Hartford, right up until he moved on to his next muse." I showed her the folder of evidence I'd compiled, screenshots of her emails, bank records of the transferred money, hotel receipts I'd found in her purse, witness statements from people who'd seen them together. April stared at the documents, her carefully constructed story crumbling like old paper. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. "Long enough to prepare. Your belongings are packed. I've removed you from our joint accounts. Bill Morrison has the paperwork if you want to contest any of it, but I think you'll find everything's been done legally and fairly. Jack, please. We can work through this. It was a mistake. No, April. It was a choice. A series of choices. And now I'm making mine." She tried tears next, then anger, then bargaining. She offered to end things with John, to attend marriage counseling, to do whatever it took to save our relationship. But we both knew it was performance art, not genuine remorse. "I'll be staying at Lila's tonight," she finally said, gathering her purse. "But this isn't over, Jack. I won't just disappear quietly." "I wouldn't expect you to. In fact, I'm counting on you making a scene. The literature festival is this weekend, isn't it? Should be quite a show." After she left, I called Detective Carla Morse, a local police officer I'd known since high school. Carla was smart, fair, and had little patience for people who thought they were above consequences. "Jack Halden," she said when she answered. "Haven't heard from you in months. What's going on?" I explained the situation, the affair, the financial deception, April's threats to make trouble. I wanted everything documented in case things escalated. "Sounds like you've handled this by the book so far," Carla said. "Keep it that way. Don't do anything that could be construed as harassment or intimidation. Let her dig her own grave." What if she tries to cause problems at the festival? It's a public event, lots of people from out of town. Then she'll cause problems in front of witnesses. Sometimes the best thing you can do is give people enough rope to hang themselves with. The literature festival opened Friday morning in the town square, with vendor booths, book signings, and readings scheduled throughout the weekend. John Sterling's keynote speech was set for Saturday evening, the highlight of the entire event. I spent Friday morning walking through the festival, observing the setup and listening to conversations. April was there, of course, coordinating vendors and managing logistics. She looked professional and competent, playing her role as the dedicated arts administrator. John Sterling arrived Friday afternoon, making a grand entrance in a silver sports car that probably cost more than I made in 2 years. He was taller than I'd expected, with the kind of casual elegance that comes from money and confidence. Women noticed him immediately, not just his looks, but his presence. He commanded attention without seeming to try. I watched from a distance as April greeted him, their interaction carefully professional in public but charged with private meaning. They were good at the deception, I had to admit. To most observers, they looked like colleagues collaborating on an important cultural event, but I'd learned to read the subtext. That evening, I attended Sterling's informal reading at the bookstore. He was undeniably talented. His prose was rich and complex, his delivery engaging. He read from his latest novel, a story about a man who discovers his wife's affair and the psychological journey that follows. Betrayal, he told the audience, is the most honest emotion. It strips away all pretense and reveals who we really are underneath our social masks. I almost laughed at the irony. Here was a man who made a career of creating betrayal, lecturing about its honesty. During the Q&A session, I raised my hand. Mr. Sterling, your work often explores infidelity and broken relationships. Do you draw from personal experience, or is it purely imagination? He smiled, clearly comfortable with the question. All fiction draws from life, in some way. The key is transforming personal experience into universal truth. The specific details matter less than the emotional reality. And do you ever consider the real-world consequences of mining other people's pain for artistic material? The smile faltered slightly. I'm not sure I understand the question. Well, if you're drawing from real situations, real marriages, real betrayals, don't you bear some responsibility for the damage that inspiration might cause? April, standing near the back of the room, looked mortified. Other audience members shifted uncomfortably. Sterling recovered quickly, giving a smooth response about the artist's duty to truth over comfort. But I'd planted a seed of doubt, and I could see it taking root in the faces around me. Saturday morning brought rain, forcing some of the outdoor events into the community center. I arrived early and positioned myself where I could observe without being obvious. April was stressed, juggling last-minute changes and vendor complaints. Sterling was nowhere to be seen, probably sleeping off a late night with his muse. Gloria appeared at my elbow, carrying a cup of coffee and wearing her best gossip-gathering expression. Quite an event, she said, though I heard there was some drama at the hotel last night. What kind of drama? Well, Margaret's friend works the night desk at Harborview. She says there was a loud argument in the penthouse suite around midnight. Something about expectations and commitments. I filed this information away. Trouble in paradise already? Sterling was probably getting bored with April, or she was getting too clingy. Either way, their fairy tale romance was showing cracks. The afternoon readings went smoothly, but I could sense tension building toward Sterling's evening keynote. This was April's moment to shine professionally, the culmination of months of planning. It was also, I suspected, when she and John planned to make their relationship public. I had other plans. At 6 p.m., I took my seat in the front row of the community center's main hall. The room was packed, easily 200 people, including local dignitaries, visiting writers, and literature enthusiasts from across the region. April introduced Sterling with glowing praise, describing him as a transformative voice in contemporary fiction. Sterling took the podium looking confident and polished. He began with prepared remarks about the role of literature in small communities, the importance of supporting local arts programs, and his gratitude for the festival's warm welcome. Then he opened the floor for questions. I waited until he'd answered several softball queries about his writing process and future projects. Then I stood up. Mr. Sterling, yesterday you spoke about betrayal as the most honest emotion. I'm curious about your research methods. Do you actively seek out situations involving infidelity, or do they just happen to find you? The room went quiet. Sterling's smile looked forced now. I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly. Do you deliberately pursue relationships with married women as source material for your fiction? April, standing near the side of the stage, looked panicked. She started to move toward me, but I continued before she could intervene. Because I've done some research of my own, about your pattern of relationships with wives of men in literary professions, about the marriages you've helped destroy in Boston, Philadelphia, and Hartford, about your current involvement with a married woman right here in our community. The room erupted in whispers and gasps. Sterling gripped the podium, his composure finally cracking. I don't have to listen to these accusations. They're not accusations, I said, pulling out my phone. They're documented facts. I began reading from April's own text messages, her emails describing me as a placeholder, her plans to leave me for Sterling's money and connections. I read John's responses, his casual dismissal of marriage vows as bourgeois constraints on authentic feeling. The audience was riveted. This was better than any literary reading. This was real drama, real betrayal, real consequences playing out in real time. April finally reached me, grabbing my arm. Jack, stop this. You're humiliating yourself. I looked at her calmly. Am I? Because from where I'm standing, you're the one who should be embarrassed. You and your muse. Sterling had abandoned the podium and was pushing through the crowd toward the exit. But Gloria and her book club ladies were strategically positioned near the doors, and they weren't moving aside easily. Leaving so soon, Mr. Sterling? Gloria called out sweetly. Don't you want to stay and discuss your creative process? The crowd was buzzing with excitement now. Phones were out, recording everything. By tomorrow, this would be all over social media, local news, and the literary gossip networks that connected small communities across the region. April was crying now, real tears, not the calculated ones she'd tried at home. Her professional reputation was dissolving in real time, along with her romantic fantasy. You've ruined everything, she whispered to me. No, April. You did that when you decided I wasn't worth your honesty. I'm just making sure everyone else knows the truth. Sterling finally escaped through a side door, leaving April alone on the stage of her own humiliation. The festival organizers were trying to restore order, but the damage was done. The evening's literary celebration had become a public reckoning. I walked out of the community center into the cool night air, feeling lighter than I had in months. Behind me, the chaos continued. Reporters asking questions, audience members sharing what they'd witnessed, April's carefully constructed world falling apart piece by piece. Some stories, I reflected, write themselves. You just have to know when to stop editing and let the truth speak for itself. Sunday morning brought a different kind of storm. My phone started ringing before 7 a.m., reporters wanting statements, neighbors seeking gossip, and April's friends demanding explanations. I let them all go to voicemail. The local newspaper had already posted an online story. Literature festival disrupted by adultery allegations. The article was carefully worded to avoid libel, but anyone who'd been there knew exactly what had happened. The comments section was brutal. Eli called around 9, his voice thick with amusement. Jack, you magnificent bastard. The whole town's talking about last night. April's been calling everyone, trying to do damage control, but it's like trying to stop a hurricane with an umbrella. What's the word at the marina? Sterling's boat is still docked here. Big fancy yacht, probably worth more than my shop. But here's the interesting part. He's been loading it up like he's planning to leave in a hurry. I felt a surge of satisfaction. John Sterling, the great literary lion, was running away with his tail between his legs. So much for standing by his muse. What about April? Haven't seen her, but Lila came by this morning asking about boat rentals. Seemed real nervous, kept checking her phone. I'm guessing they're planning some kind of escape. After hanging up with Eli, I drove to the marina. It was a gray morning, with low clouds and the smell of rain in the air. Perfect weather for what I had in mind. Sterling's yacht was impressive, a 40-foot luxury craft that screamed money and status. He was on deck, moving with the urgent efficiency of a man trying to escape consequences. He'd traded his literary festival outfit for expensive sailing gear, but he still looked like what he was, a predator fleeing his hunting ground. I parked where I could observe without being seen and waited. April arrived 20 minutes later, driving Lila's car and looking haggard. Even from a distance, I could see she'd been crying. Her festival clothes had been replaced by jeans and a sweatshirt, and her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She boarded the yacht, and immediately I could hear raised voices carrying across the water. Their fairy tale romance was hitting some rough weather. I called Eli. Remember that favor you owe me from when I restored your grandfather's Bible? Yeah, what do you need? I'm at the marina. Sterling's yacht is in slip 23. Think you could take a look at his engine? Maybe find some mechanical issues that need immediate attention? Eli's laugh was pure mischief. Oh, I see mechanical issues everywhere I look. Give me 10 minutes. While I waited for Eli, I positioned myself closer to Sterling's boat. The argument between John and April was escalating, and their voices carried clearly across the water. "You said this would be simple," April was saying. "You said we'd leave together, start fresh somewhere else." "That was before your husband turned into some kind of vengeful psychopath," Sterling replied. "Do you have any idea what this is going to do to my reputation? My publisher is already asking questions." "So, that's it? You're just abandoning me?" "I'm being practical. You're radioactive now, April. No one in the literary world will touch you after last night's performance." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Eli appeared beside me, carrying a toolbox and wearing coveralls. "What kind of mechanical problems are we looking for?" "Nothing permanent, just enough to keep them in port until the authorities can sort things out." "Authorities?" I may have mentioned to Detective Morse that Sterling's been making threats about leaving the jurisdiction before his legal issues are resolved. Eli grinned. "You're getting devious in your old age, Jack. I like it." We approached the yacht together. Sterling saw us coming and stepped to the rail, his face flushed with anger. "This is private property. You're trespassing." "Actually," I said pleasantly, "this is a public marina, and my friend Eli here is the harbor master's designated mechanic. We've had reports of fuel leaks from your slip." It was a complete fabrication, but Sterling didn't know that. Eli was already examining the yacht's exterior, making concerned noises about potential environmental hazards. "I don't see any leaks," Sterling protested. "Engine problems can be tricky," Eli said, climbing aboard without invitation. "Sometimes the issues are internal. Mind if I take a look at your motor?" Before Sterling could object, Eli had disappeared into the engine compartment. I heard the sounds of tools being used, followed by Eli's voice. "Oh, that's not good. That's not good at all." "What's wrong?" April asked, appearing on deck. "Looks like your fuel line's been compromised. Could be dangerous to operate in this condition. Harbor Master's going to want to inspect this before you take her out." Sterling's face went red. "This is harassment. I'm calling the police." "Good idea," I agreed. "Detective Morse should be here any minute. She wanted to ask you some questions about your departure plans." As if summoned, Carla's patrol car pulled into the marina parking lot. She approached the dock with the measured stride of someone who dealt with plenty of entitled troublemakers. "Mr. Sterling, I'm Detective Morse. I understand you're planning to leave town." "I have every right to travel freely." "Of course you do. But there are some questions about financial irregularities involving the festival funds. The festival committee filed a complaint this morning." This was news to me, but I kept my expression neutral. April looked stricken. "What financial irregularities?" she asked. Carla consulted her notebook. "Unauthorized hotel charges, inflated expense reports, missing petty cash. Standard stuff, really, but it needs to be investigated." I realized what had happened. April had been covering Sterling's expenses from the festival budget, probably thinking she could sort it out later. Now, with everything falling apart, the missing money had been discovered. "This is ridiculous," Sterling fumed. "I'm leaving, and you can't stop me." "Actually, I can," Carla said mildly, "pending investigation of the financial complaints. And now Eli here tells me your boat has mechanical problems that make it unsafe for operation." Eli emerged from the engine compartment, wiping his hands on a rag. "Sorry, folks. This baby's not going anywhere until those fuel lines are replaced. Could take a week to get the parts." Sterling looked like he was about to explode. His great escape had been reduced to a farce, and he was trapped in a small town where everyone now knew his secrets. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth. "I'll stay at the hotel until this is resolved." "About that," Carla said, "the hotel manager asked me to inform you that your credit card was declined this morning. Something about reaching your limit. They'll need you to settle your account before you can stay another night." The humiliation was complete. Sterling, the wealthy sophisticate, was broke and stranded. April, his devoted muse, was facing potential criminal charges. Their grand romance had devolved into a mutual disaster. As we walked back to our cars, Carla fell into step beside me. "Nice work," she said quietly. Though I should mention that the festival committee really did file a complaint. Apparently April's been creative with the budget for months. Interesting timing. Isn't it? Amazing how these things come to light once people start paying attention. That afternoon, I stopped by Murphy's Tavern for lunch and found the place buzzing with conversation about the morning's events. The story had already grown in the telling. Sterling's yacht had become a luxury liner, the argument had become a physical fight, and the financial irregularities had become major embezzlement. Pete the bartender slid a beer across to me. "Hell of a weekend, Jack. You doing okay?" "Better than I expected. Sometimes the truth is more satisfying than revenge." "Speaking of truth, you might want to know that April's been calling around town, trying to find someone to post bail money. Seems like her fancy boyfriend's accounts are frozen pending the investigation. I shook my head in mock sympathy. Terrible when you can't rely on the people you trust. Gloria appeared at my elbow, practically vibrating with excitement. Jack, dear, you must tell me everything. Margaret says April's been evicted from Lila's apartment, something about not wanting to be associated with the scandal. Where's she staying now? Nobody knows. Her parents won't take her calls, and all her gallery friends are keeping their distance. Her professional self-preservation, you understand? I understood perfectly. April had built her life on appearances and social connections. Now that her reputation was destroyed, those connections were evaporating like morning fog. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at the old pier at sunset. Come alone. A. I showed the message to Carla, who was sitting at the other end of the bar. Sounds dramatic, she said. Want some backup? I think I can handle one desperate ex-wife, but keep your phone handy, just in case. As the sun began to set, I drove to the old pier at the north end of town. It was a lonely spot, abandoned when the new marina was built, frequented now only by teenagers and people who wanted privacy for difficult conversations. April was waiting for me, sitting on a weathered bench and staring out at the water. She looked exhausted, defeated, nothing like the confident woman who'd left for her creative retreat a week ago. Thank you for coming, she said without turning around. I sat down beside her, maintaining careful distance. What do you want, April? I want to understand why you destroyed everything. We could have worked this out privately, gone to counseling, found a way forward. Instead, you chose to humiliate me in public. I chose to tell the truth. You're the one who decided it was humiliating. She finally looked at me, and I saw genuine confusion in her eyes. But why, Jack? Why did you have to be so cruel? It was a fair question, and I considered it carefully before answering. Because you didn't just cheat on me, April. You dismissed me. You treated our marriage like a rough draft that could be discarded when you found something better. You stole money from our accounts and festival funds. You planned to abandon everything we built together without even the courtesy of an honest conversation. I was going to tell you. When? After you'd moved to New York with John? After you'd established your new life? You were going to leave me a note, maybe send a text from the airport? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. John's gone, she said finally. Took the first flight out of Portland this morning. Left me to deal with the mess alone. Shocking. A man who makes a career of ruining marriages turned out to be unreliable. The gallery fired me. The festival committee is pressing charges. My parents won't return my calls. I have nowhere to go, Jack. I felt a flicker of the old sympathy, the instinct to protect and provide that had defined our marriage. But then I remembered her text messages, her casual cruelty, her plan to discard me like an outdated manuscript. You made your choices, April. Now you get to live with the consequences. So that's it? 7 years of marriage and you're just walking away? You walked away first. I'm just not following you anymore. I stood to leave, but she grabbed my arm. Please, Jack. I know I made mistakes, but I'm still your wife. Doesn't that mean anything? I looked down at her hand on my arm, then at her face. For a moment, I saw the woman I'd married, young, ambitious, full of dreams we'd planned to pursue together. But I also saw the woman who'd betrayed those dreams, who'd chosen excitement over commitment, who'd treated our life together as something to be escaped rather than cherished. It means I'll make sure you have a good lawyer, I said gently, and I'll testify truthfully if asked. But we're done, April. We've been done since the moment you decided I wasn't worth your honesty. I walked back to my car, leaving her alone on the pier with the gathering darkness and the weight of her choices. In the rearview mirror, I could see her silhouette against the fading light, a figure from a story that had finally reached its inevitable conclusion. Some endings aren't happy, but they can still be right. Tuesday morning brought unexpected visitors. I was in my workshop, carefully repairing the binding on a 1920s poetry collection, when the doorbell rang insistently. Through the window, I saw a sleek black sedan with New York plates parked in my driveway. The man at my door was tall, expensively dressed, and radiated the kind of quiet authority that comes with serious money. Behind him stood a younger woman with a tablet and the efficient demeanor of a high-level assistant. Mr. Halden, I'm Richard Blackwood, John Sterling's publisher. This is my associate, Ms. Chen. We'd like to speak with you about the recent difficulties. I invited them into my living room, curious about this development. Blackwood settled into April's former chair like he owned it, while Ms. Chen positioned herself to take notes. Mr. Halden, I'll be direct. John Sterling is one of our most valuable authors. His recent behavior has created significant problems for our company, and we're here to discuss a resolution. What kind of resolution? We're prepared to offer you a substantial settlement in exchange for your discretion regarding Mr. Sterling's personal conduct, a non-disclosure agreement, if you will. I almost laughed. You want to pay me to keep quiet about something that's already public knowledge? We want to prevent further damage to Mr. Sterling's reputation and, by extension, our company's interests. The literary community is small, Mr. Halden. Rumors and scandals can destroy careers. Ms. Chen opened her tablet and showed me a figure that made my eyes widen. It was more money than I made in 3 years. That's generous, I admitted, but I'm not interested in helping John Sterling escape consequences for his actions. Blackwood's expression hardened slightly. Perhaps you don't understand the situation. Mr. Sterling has significant resources and influential friends. Legal action against you for defamation is certainly possible. Let me save you some time, I said, standing up. I documented everything before going public. I have evidence of adultery, financial fraud, and a pattern of predatory behavior spanning multiple states. If John Sterling wants to discuss defamation in court, I welcome the opportunity. After they left, I called Carla to report the visit. She was intrigued but not surprised. Sterling's been busy, she said. Made bail yesterday, hired a high-priced lawyer from Boston. Word is he's planning to leave the state as soon as the legal issues are resolved. What about April? Still in custody. Her lawyer's trying to work out a plea deal, but the festival committee wants their money back. Could be looking at serious charges. I felt a complex mix of emotions about April's situation. Part of me was satisfied that she was facing consequences for her actions. Another part, the part that had loved her for 7 years, felt sorry for how completely her life had collapsed. That afternoon, Simon Walsh appeared at my door. Simon was April's former assistant at the gallery, a nervous young man with artistic pretensions and a talent for office gossip. Mr. Halden, I hope you don't mind me coming by. I wanted to talk to you about April, and about Mr. Sterling. I invited him in, curious about what he might reveal. Simon perched on the edge of the sofa like a bird, ready to take flight. I need to tell someone the truth, he began, about what really happened at the gallery, about the money that went missing. I'm listening. April didn't steal that money alone. Sterling convinced her to do it, said it was just temporary, that he'd pay it back after his next book advance. He was broke, Mr. Halden. All that wealth, the fancy car, the yacht, it was all borrowed or rented. This was a revelation I hadn't expected. The great John Sterling, literary lion and seducer of wives, was nothing more than an elaborate fraud. How do you know this? I handled his travel arrangements, his hotel bookings. Everything was charged to credit cards that kept getting declined. April was covering his expenses from the festival budget, thinking she was helping her famous lover. She had no idea she was being used. Simon pulled out his phone and showed me screenshots of text messages between April and Sterling. The conversations painted a picture of manipulation and deception that went far beyond simple adultery. Why are you telling me this? Because April might be selfish and foolish, but she doesn't deserve to go to prison for that man's crimes. And because... He hesitated, then continued. Because Sterling threatened me. Said if I talked to anyone about his financial situation, he'd make sure I never worked in the art world again. I studied Simon's face, looking for signs of deception, but he seemed genuinely frightened and genuinely concerned about April's fate. What do you want me to do with this information? Give it to the police. Let them know that April was as much a victim as anyone else. After Simon left, I sat in my workshop trying to process this new information. My revenge against April had been based on her betrayal of our marriage, her casual dismissal of our life together. But if she'd also been manipulated by Sterling, if she was facing prison time for crimes he'd orchestrated, the situation was more complex than I'd realized. I called Carla and arranged to meet her at the police station. She reviewed Simon's evidence with professional interest. This changes things, she admitted. If Sterling was orchestrating the financial fraud, April might be looking at reduced charges, maybe even immunity if she cooperates. Would that be justice? Justice is complicated, Jack. Your wife made bad choices, but she was also being manipulated by a professional predator. Sometimes the best outcome isn't perfect revenge. It's making sure the real villain faces consequences. That evening, I received a call from an unknown number. The voice was familiar but strained. Jack, it's April. I'm out on bail. My lawyer got the charges reduced. I wanted to thank you. Thank me. Simon told me what you did, how you gave the police evidence that Sterling was manipulating me. You could have let me take the fall for everything, but you didn't. I wasn't sure how to respond. My feelings about April were still complicated. Anger mixed with residual affection, disappointment tempered by understanding. "You were still my wife," I said finally. "Whatever else happened between us, I never wanted to see you destroyed. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. What I did to you, to us, there's no excuse. But I want you to know that I understand now. What Sterling was, what he did to both of us. Both of us. He used me to get to you, Jack. The whole affair was partly about humiliating you, proving he could take whatever he wanted from men he considered beneath him. I was too infatuated to see it, but that's what it was." This revelation hit me harder than I'd expected. My marriage hadn't just been collateral damage in Sterling's pursuit of inspiration. It had been a deliberate target. "Where are you now?" "Staying with my sister in Vermont, trying to figure out what comes next. The gallery job is gone, obviously. My reputation in the art world is finished, but maybe that's not entirely a bad thing." "What do you mean?" "Maybe I needed to lose everything to understand what actually mattered. I'm not asking for another chance, Jack. I know that's impossible. But I wanted you to know that I finally see what I threw away." After she hung up, I poured myself a drink and sat on my back porch, watching the stars emerge in the clear night sky. The house felt different now, not empty, but peaceful, like a book that had finally been properly restored. My phone rang again. This time it was Eli, his voice tight with urgency. "Jack, you need to get down to the marina. Now. Sterling's here and he's not alone." "What do you mean?" "He's got some guys with him. Professional types, if you know what I mean. They're working on his boat and they don't look like mechanics." I grabbed my keys and drove to the marina, my mind racing. If Sterling was planning to flee, and if he'd brought enforcers with him, the situation could turn dangerous quickly. The marina was dark, except for the lights on Sterling's yacht. I could see figures moving around on deck, and there was definitely something threatening about their efficiency. I called Carla from my car. "Sterling's at the marina with what looked like hired muscle. I think he's planning to run." "Stay in your car," she ordered. "I'm on my way." But as I watched, Sterling appeared on deck and seemed to be looking directly at me. Even in the darkness, I could feel his malevolent attention. My phone buzzed with a text. "Pier 7. Come alone, or your friend Eli pays the price." Through the yacht's windows, I could see a figure tied to a chair. Even at this distance, I recognized Eli's distinctive profile. The game had suddenly become much more dangerous. I had a choice: wait for police backup and risk Eli's safety, or face Sterling alone and hope I could handle whatever he had planned. Some choices make themselves. I got out of my car and walked toward the pier, my heart pounding but my resolve clear. Sterling had made this personal from the beginning? Now it was time to finish what he'd started. The confrontation I'd been avoiding was finally at hand, and there would be no more hiding behind evidence or legal procedures. Just two men, their grievances, and whatever truth would emerge from the darkness. The pier stretched into the darkness like a wooden finger pointing at Sterling's yacht. My footsteps echoed hollowly on the weathered planks as I approached the confrontation I'd been building toward all week. The air smelled of salt water and creosote, with an undertone of something more ominous, the scent of violence waiting to happen. Sterling stood at the yacht's rail, no longer the polished literary figure from the festival. His expensive clothes were wrinkled, his silver hair disheveled, and his face carried the desperate look of a man whose carefully constructed world was collapsing. "Mr. Halden," he called out as I reached the end of the pier. "Thank you for coming. I was hoping we could have a civilized conversation." "Let Eli go, and we'll talk about civilization." "Your friend is fine, merely ensuring you'd give me your full attention." He gestured toward the yacht's cabin. "Please, come aboard. We have much to discuss." I stepped onto the boat, immediately aware of how isolated we were. The marina was empty, except for a few distant lights, and the sound of water lapping against the hull masked any noise we might make. The yacht's interior was luxurious, but felt cramped with tension. Eli sat in a chair near the galley, his hands zip-tied behind his back, but otherwise unharmed. Two men in dark suits flanked him, professional muscle with the blank expressions of people who hurt others for money. "Jack," Eli said, relief evident in his voice. "Sorry about this. They grabbed me when I was checking the dock lines." "He's unharmed," Sterling assured me, settling into a leather chair like he was holding court. "And he'll remain so, provided we can reach an understanding." "What kind of understanding?" "The kind that prevents my complete destruction. You see, Mr. Halden, you've been remarkably effective in your campaign against me. My publisher has dropped me. My literary reputation is in ruins. The authorities are investigating my finances. Even my yacht isn't actually mine. It belongs to a friend who's now demanding its return." I looked around the cabin with new eyes, seeing the borrowed luxury that Simon had described. Sterling's entire persona was an elaborate fiction. So what do you want from me? A retraction, a public statement that your accusations were based on misunderstandings and personal jealousy, something that gives me enough credibility to rebuild elsewhere. And if I refuse? One of the muscle men shifted slightly, his hand moving inside his jacket. The threat was clear without being spoken. I'd prefer not to resort to unpleasantness, Sterling said, but I'm facing complete ruin, Mr. Halden. Desperate men make desperate choices. I studied the situation, calculating odds and options. 2 armed men, plus Sterling. Eli tied up and vulnerable. No immediate backup, though Carla should be arriving soon. You know what's interesting about your situation? I said, settling into a chair across from Sterling. You've spent your career writing about desperate men making desperate choices. Now you get to live it. This isn't a literary exercise. Isn't it? The great John Sterling, reduced to threatening small-town mechanics and book restorers. There's definitely a story here, though probably not one you'd want to publish. Sterling's face flushed with anger. You think this is amusing? You've destroyed everything I've worked for. No, John. You did that yourself. I just made sure people knew about it. You self-righteous little man. Do you have any idea what I could have given April? The life I could have shown her? Instead, she's stuck with your small-town mediocrity. April made her choice. She chose excitement over stability, fantasy over reality. Now she gets to live with the consequences, just like you do. Consequences, Sterling spat. You want to talk about consequences? Let me show you some consequences. He nodded to one of his men, who moved toward Eli with casual menace. But before he could reach him, the yacht's cabin door burst open. Detective Carla Morse entered with her weapon drawn, followed by 2 other officers. Police! Nobody move! The situation exploded into chaos. Sterling's men reached for their guns, but they were too slow. Carla's backup had them covered before they could draw. Eli threw himself sideways in his chair, getting out of the line of fire. John Sterling, Carla announced. You're under arrest for kidnapping, extortion, and conspiracy to commit assault. As the officers cuffed Sterling and his associates, I helped Eli to his feet. He was shaken, but unharmed, already making jokes about his brief career as a hostage. How did you know where to find us? I asked Carla. GPS tracker on your phone, courtesy of a concerned citizen who shall remain nameless. She glanced meaningfully toward the marina office, where I could see Gloria's silhouette in the window. Also, Sterling's not as smart as he thinks. He used his real name when he hired those thugs. We've been tracking them since they arrived in town. Sterling, now in handcuffs, turned to me with undiluted hatred. This isn't over, Halden. I have resources, connections. You have nothing, I interrupted. No money, no publisher, no reputation, no friends. You're just another failed writer with delusions of grandeur. I'm twice the man you'll ever be. You're a predator who preys on marriages because you can't build anything of your own. You're pathetic, John, and now everyone knows it. The officers led Sterling away, his literary pretensions finally stripped bare. His hired muscle followed, looking embarrassed to have been caught so easily. As the yacht was secured as evidence, Eli and I walked back toward shore. The crisis was over, but I felt strangely unsatisfied. The confrontation I'd been building toward had ended not with dramatic revelation, but with simple police work. You okay? Eli asked, rubbing his wrists where the zip ties had been. Yeah, just anticlimactic, I guess. What did you expect? A sword fight? This isn't a novel, Jack. Real life is messier and less dramatic. He was right, of course. Real revenge wasn't about elaborate schemes or perfect justice. It was about truth, consequences, and the slow grinding of reality against fantasy. The next morning brought a parade of visitors to my house. First was Bill Morrison, my lawyer, with updates on the legal proceedings. Sterling's looking at serious time, he reported. Kidnapping, extortion, fraud in multiple states. His lawyer's already talking about plea bargains. What about April? Charges reduced to misdemeanor embezzlement with restitution. She'll probably get probation and community service. The prosecutor believes she was manipulated. That's fair. There's something else. Sterling's publisher wants to settle the defamation threat they made. Apparently they have discovered some very unflattering things about their former star author. The settlement offer was substantial, enough to renovate my workshop and maybe take that trip to Ireland that April and I had planned. It felt like tainted money, but it was also acknowledgement that I'd been right all along. Gloria arrived next, carrying a casserole and an eager expression. I brought lunch, she announced, settling into my kitchen like she belonged there. And I wanted to hear everything about last night. The whole town's buzzing. I gave her an edited version of events, knowing she'd embellish them in the retelling. By evening, I'd probably be credited with single-handedly capturing an international crime syndicate. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now I get back to my normal life. Restore books, fix broken things, enjoy the quiet." And April. April gets to figure out who she really is without someone else's expectations defining her. Maybe that's the best outcome for everyone. That afternoon, I received an unexpected call from a literary agent in New York. "Mr. Halden, this is Patricia Wells from the Morrison Agency. I've been following the Sterling situation in the news, and I'm wondering if you'd be interested in writing a book about your experience." I'm not a writer. I restore books, I don't create them. Sometimes the best stories come from people who live them rather than imagine them. Think about it. A small-town book restorer takes down a predatory literary celebrity. There's definitely a market for that narrative. After she hung up, I sat in my workshop surrounded by the tools of my trade: brushes, adhesives, binding materials, and the eternal smell of old paper. This was my world, quiet, methodical, focused on preservation rather than creation. But maybe there was a story worth telling. Not a sensationalized account of adultery and revenge, but something more honest about marriage, betrayal, and the difference between justice and vengeance. I pulled out a yellow legal pad and began writing by hand, the way stories were meant to be written, one word at a time, with careful attention to truth over drama. "My name is Jack Halden," I wrote, "and I restore rare books for a living. People think it's boring work, but there's something poetic about bringing damaged things back to life, about finding truth hidden beneath layers of neglect and lies." Outside my window, the town was returning to normal. The literature festival was over, the scandal was becoming history, and life was resuming its familiar rhythms. April was gone, Sterling was in custody, and I was alone in the house we'd shared for 7 years. But I wasn't lonely. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Not someone's husband, not a victim of betrayal, just Jack Halden, book restorer, keeper of stories, guardian of truth. Some endings aren't happy, but they can still be right. Some books can't be restored to their original condition, but they can be rebound into something stronger. I kept writing as the sun set outside my window, telling the story of a marriage that couldn't be saved and a man who learned the difference between revenge and justice. It wasn't a literary masterpiece, but it was honest, and sometimes honesty is the most powerful story of all. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 9 times as I finished the first chapter. I set down my pen and looked around my workshop, my sanctuary, my world, my future. Tomorrow I would return to restoring other people's treasures. Tonight, I was creating something of my own. Some stories write themselves. You just have to know when to stop editing and let the truth speak for itself,